Hi, this is Trish Thomas-Mink, and this is the story of Bobby Baker and the women around John F. Kennedy Jr. that could have actually taken down his presidency. This is a story that's not often heard about the assassination of JFK. And did the assassination save his reputation and his legacy? We remember Kennedy as a hero for his work with civil rights and eradicating corruption. As most of us know now, John Kennedy had a darker side to him, and the darker side was around his sex life. It was there that Bobby Baker and the women almost took the president down. Now, Bobby Baker came to Washington, D.C. as a Senate page while he was still in school. The year was 1943, and Baker stated that all around him soldiers were marching when he first came into the Capitol, and it scared him, as it was during World War II. By 1955, he was the secretary to the Senate Democrats. The New York Times stated he became one of the most influential non-elected men in the American government of the 1950s and early 1960s. And this is how he affected President Kennedy. Kennedy was a notorious womanizer, and most insiders knew it. He was an aristocratic man born into one of the richest families in the United States. JFK's father, Joe Kennedy, was a banker. He was also a womanizer himself. Most rich men and their wives knew it was part of the lifestyle. There would be other women. Now, that last line was taken from a documentary called JFK's Women. What the women understood or agreed upon their marriages may be an entirely different thing. However, Jackie Kennedy's father was a womanizer, so it is said by journalists that she knew the kind of life she was getting into. And many in the government and around him knew of his exploits. In 1958, a landlord, Florence Cater, knew that one of her tenants, a woman by the name of Pamela Turner, was having an affair with JFK. Pamela actually worked with him. It is said she went to 35 different journalists to tell her story, and no one would report on it. It was at a time when men had all the power, and it was recognized that there was a private and a public life. And most of the reporters were men, and they were not going to report on the then married senator. Bobby Baker, by the age of 20, was secretary to the Senate majority. Throughout his career, he was an ambitious man and had various businesses on the side: real estate, hotels, and the vending business. It was his vending business that initially turned the focused light of investigation on his activities. He had promised a man a contract for vending and then reneged on it, and the man filed suit against him. Though at the end of it, this would only be a very small part of his undoing. His work led him to become friends with then Senator John F. Kennedy. Baker said he was a Baptist married to a Catholic, saying that he understood the senator's point of view. And Senator Kennedy would ask Baker, "Do you think that a Catholic could be president?" It was Senator Kennedy's vote on the jury trial amendment that actually sealed his fate. Now, this amendment was opposed by Mrs. Roosevelt, among other leaders, but at that time, many of the other senators expected and supported JFK becoming president. The vote for the jury trial amendment won him so much support in the South and created a pathway to him becoming president. So back to Bobby Baker. He had this high-rise condominium in Washington, D.C., and he would bring his high-profile Washington insiders over to meet with women that were not their wives. He was also one of the co-founders of the Quorum Club, located in the Carroll Arms Hotel. The Washington Post said it was a place where lawmakers, lobbyists, and other interested parties would drink, play cards, and dally with young women. The club was even outfitted with a buzzer that would alert the senators when they were needed across the street for a vote. There were calls for an investigation around this, and it was said that the Senate Democrats did sort of do an inquiry, but at that point it stopped right there. One of the big issues with John F. Kennedy was his pick of women. They were beautiful, high profile, and some liaisons were even dangerous for a senator, let alone a president. 3 were exceedingly high profile. Now, there were others that were significant, but these 3, to me, posed the most threat to his presidency. And they were Inga Arvid, Marilyn Monroe, and a woman by the name of Ellen Rometsch. One of his first scandals, really, was a British scandal called the Profumo Affair. In 1963, a woman by the name of Christine Keeler, who was a showgirl / call girl, a term she hated, was having an affair with the British Secretary John Profumo and a Soviet spy by the name of Yevgeny Ivanov. She was dating both men at the same time, and when it was discovered by the press, it was called the Sex and Security Scandal that rocked Britain. John Kennedy followed the scandal with vigor, and at first it appeared like it was just tabloid fodder. But as the scandal went on, meetings were being held behind closed doors in secret. An author by the name of Stephen Durrell authored a book called The Secret World of Stephen Ward, Scandal, Sex, and Deadly Secrets in the Profuma Affair. And he stated, there was growing concern about the Profuma case in Washington, D.C. There were reports that Americans may be involved in the scandal. Now, a call girl in Stephen Ward's circle named Marcella Mariana, I've heard it said both ways, Novotny, said that President Kennedy had slept with her on several occasions while she worked in New York City. It was right before his inauguration to the presidency, so that would be around December 1960. There was an FBI document that states she was part of a call girl ring close to the president. She claimed to be closely related to the Czechoslovakian communist president. Was she a Soviet plant? An American paper printed the story, and the paper was the New York Journal American. It was a right-wing paper and part of the Hearst Corporation, Randolph Hearst. It also received some information in secret by none other than J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI, who was not always a fan of the Kennedys. John Kennedy wanted to be re-elected this year, and this was one of the possible scandals that could stop his re-election. They published a story but did not name the president. They referred to him as a high U.S. aide. It said in the article, the person held a very high elected office. The reporters and Washington insiders knew exactly who they were talking about and that they were referring to the president. U.S. citizens did not. The documents also referenced a woman by the name of Susie Chang. She was a Chinese-born communist who also knew, quote-unquote, Kennedy. She was a call girl and a procurer with a large FBI file. The Bureau was trying to determine if they could build a case against her using the White Slave Traffic Act. She was part of the same call girl ring as Novotny. When Novotny went back to Britain, now this is after she had been working in New York, Stephen Ward introduced her to the same Yevgeny Ivanov, the Soviet spy, who Keeler had been sleeping with, and she began sleeping with him also. The interesting thing about Novotny is she offered information to the KGB that she had gained from her work. Chang, Keeler, and Novotny had involvements with members of the Communist Party at the height of the Cold War, who were our mortal enemies. Now, most younger people do not understand the threat of living during the Cold War. when you could have an atomic bomb attack at any time. These women were major threats to the Kennedys' re-election. Remember, this is at the time when people were building bomb shelters in their backyards. Now, Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General, who was also the president's brother, summoned the editor from the New York American Journal. At the meeting, there was also a liaison from the FBI who took notes, so this is why we know what happened in the meeting. Bobby asked for the sources' names, and of course the paper refused. He asked who the high official was, and at this they reported to him honestly that it was John Kennedy. At that time, Bobby Kennedy, the president's brother, threatened the Hearst Corporation with anti-monopoly laws, and the paper never again published the stories. JFK had dodged a bullet in the election year, but this would not be his only one. Now on to the three major players in JFK's women's scandal. The first is Inga Arvid. She was a beauty queen from Copenhagen, Denmark. She was a recently separated but not quite divorced woman, scandalous at the time. She was married to a man by the name of Paul Freeholz when she started a romantic relationship with JFK. She had attended Columbia School of Journalism, and she once interviewed Adolf Hitler, a fact that haunted her the rest of her life, even though she detested Hitler. The FBI had a file on Arvid, and so they followed Kennedy and Arvid around while they were together. She met John Kennedy in 1941 while he was an ensign working at the U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence. The Navy reassigned Kennedy when learning about Arvid. They saw her as a Mata Hari figure. It was Joe Kennedy's reputation that kept John Kennedy from being booted out of the Navy. So John Kennedy was reassigned to South Carolina in 1942, which ended the relationship. Number 2 was Marilyn Monroe. Her birthday song to then President John F. Kennedy is so famous you can still find it on YouTube. Marilyn was a meteoric Hollywood star and considered emotionally fragile. Some considered her to be mentally ill, though to be fair, she was taking a lot of prescribed medication and probably had an addiction issue. And it was a term assigned to emotional women all the time at that point. The birthday song was her last night with Kennedy. It is also rumored that she turned to Attorney General and the brother of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, for comfort. She died in August 1962. She was discovered at home in her bed. Marilyn was holding in her hand a piece of paper. The paper had the White House telephone number on it. There is still much controversy and conspiracy theories about how she died and how it was handled by the LA coroner. Her affair with one or both brothers could have created such a scandal that the re-election of John F. Kennedy would have been impossible. The Christian values of the general population would have prevented ordinary citizens from accepting their affair. The one I think is the most compromising of John F. Kennedy was with Ellen Rometsch. Now, I don't know that I'm saying her last name correctly, but it's Rometsch, so I think it's Rometsch. Rometsch. Okay, that's enough of that. She was born in Germany and was rumored to be an East German spy for the Soviets. Rometsch was assigned a cover in the West German Embassy in Washington, D.C. in the 1960s. She also frequented the Quorum Club and was introduced to President Kennedy by Bobby Baker. The FBI was also investigating her as she was born in East Germany, then a communist country. It was said that she was as beautiful as Elizabeth Taylor and a true party girl. She was so desired that one politician paid her $5,000 in 1960s money to have a date with her. Now, at that time, the average house was $11,000 and the average car was $2,800. Bill Thompson was President Kennedy's wingman. He went up to Baker and asked if this beautiful woman would have dinner with the president. She went to the White House on many occasions after their initial date. Many believed that Ellen was a spy. The president's connection to a woman with communist ties one more time was not only a threat to his re-election, but many believed to the security of the U.S. Bobby Kennedy acted quickly and revoked her visa in August of 1963, sending her back to Germany. She could have ended the presidency either by preventing his re-election or causing his impeachment. One more time, JFK avoided scandal. That year, in September of 1963, a political scandal did explode. Senior Secretary to the Senate, Bobby Baker, was caught up in a scandal that threatened all politicians. It threatened to expose JFK's affair with Ellen Rometsch. It was said that Baker was providing call girls for the highest politicians. To stem off some of the potential danger, Baker reassigned his position to the Senate, so he just resigned. By that time, Baker was a millionaire. He hoped resigning would slow down or end the investigation, thus protecting the men he arranged dates for. They were comparing Baker's scandal with the Profumo scandal. The New York Daily News was starting to write about the young German woman who was deported for having an affair with a high frontiersman in the executive branch. So they were not yet naming names. What the paper had written was a coded term. President Kennedy had said his presidency aimed for a new frontier. At this time, the White House reached out to the FBI, asking them to squash the story. J. Edgar Hoover said it was not his job. So again, Bobby Kennedy contacted the writer of the piece, and the writer would not reveal the aim of the piece. It was assumed that he was threatened, as no more stories were ever written. Bobby Kennedy again came to the aid of his brother. The New York Daily News reporter Claude Mollenhoff published no more stories about the president and Rometsch. At this point, an investigation was underway, and the only thing that protected President John F. Kennedy was his trip to Dallas, Texas, in a subsequent assassination. Eventually, Bobby Baker went to prison, and years later, John F. Kennedy's scandals are all out in the open. That said, millions of America still see John F. Kennedy as a great leader interested in a moral approach to leading the nation, getting rid of organized crime, shutting down the CIA, protecting the U.S. from communism, and promoting equal civil rights. This piece just reminds me of how human and flawed we all are, including our leaders, and how as our culture changes, how it figures into what we deem as acceptable behavior. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Kennedy was